All right, welcome back to another episode. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, we get to introduce you to our lovely guest, the one, the only Miss Gemma Clatworthy, who publishes under G Clatworthy. G is in G-Man, the Fed. She is the proverbial government agent, superstar for 007, I understand, right?
Something like that. Or maybe an urban fantasy and children's book author based in lovely Wiltshire here in the UK.
Is that is that around London? For those of us on the other side of the pond, what's it close to that we might know?
Yeah, so it's about 50, 60 miles away from London to the west.
Okay, because for most of us Yanks, London's like the only city in your little island.
Yeah, for sure. So it's London. It's just
Yeah,
London.
basically,
All of
it's
it.
London. All of it. The whole island is London. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Outside of writing, which is what I really love to do, I enjoy crafting and playing board games when I get the time. So I've got a young family, so a lot of my spare time is spent with them.
Oh, what kind of board games?
I really love co-op games and escape room style games. So I don't know if you've played any of those, like the Unlock series. That's probably
I
one of
have
my
not.
favorites.
Okay.
They're really good.
I have to expand my horizons, apparently. All
What
right.
game do you like playing?
Well, I spend way too much time playing Dungeons and Dragons and various tabletop role playing games. When I let myself, all about the open world RPGs like Fallout and Skyrim. I've got way too many hours logged into Skyrim. Mostly since I started writing, I sort of let my Xbox collect dust because, well, it's one or the other. I don't have the brain power for both. But I do enjoy some tabletop games. It's just hard to find a quorum of people to play with. So
Yeah, I think that's why I like co-op. So normally it's just me and my other half playing, and we do a lot better when we're on the same team.
yeah, so I play a lot of chess with my youngest. Sort of teaches him to relate to the world. He's with special needs kids. You do what you can, and it's a way to teach confidence because he's smarter than me. He beats me all the time. Um, it just helps. And I think games in general they teach people problem solving in ways that I think some of this mindless, first person shooters, which I also love, so don't send hate mail. But I think some of these strategy games they teach you to think in ways that's lost in this fast paced world.
Yeah, certainly. There's loads of decisions to make, especially in some of the more Euro style games. You know, do you play the long game or do you go for the quick points? So yeah, we're starting to get my kids into board games as well, but they're still little, so it's more roll and moves than anything too strategic.
But it still teaches teamwork, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So the second part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we first found them, and this one's a really simple one. Like I said, she's a secret agent. So when I was working for MI6 and she was working for Double, okay, I'm making all that stuff up. Mel Todd, a friend of the show, said, "Hey, I'm doing this anthology, and you're going to talk to us about it." So I said yes, and here we are. Now, since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we cannot let you escape without the religion question before we start. So, which church do you attend? The Last Starfighter, Warehouse 13, or Flight of the Navigator?
You know what? I'm so ashamed. I haven't actually seen any of those. Maybe I could play the youth card because I was only one when some of those were out.
See
But
here, kid.
yeah. So I will get round to watching them. But I guess on the sci-fi side, I can remember watching Star Trek and Doctor Who with my dad. So I don't know if that
That
helps.
works. That works. Those are good ones too. So, do you have a favorite Trek captain?
I think Picard was the one that I grew up with, so I'm going to have to say him. Maybe that's
Earl
controversial. I
Grey.
don't know.
Is it because he drinks tea?
That's a big part of it. Being British, tea
I
lovers.
understand. So I have this. My first series I actually published for a British publisher. Who we have this going back and forth. How do you drink your beer? Ice cold as the gods intended, or some weird warm temperature?
I don't actually drink beer, but if you ask me about gin and tonic, it would be ice cold.
Okay, well, you get a pass if you're not drinking it. You're not drinking it wrong, so you still win. So, and because we're polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades, Shannara Chronicles, The Witcher, or Grimm?
I am really enjoying the Witcher TV series. I think they've done a fantastic job with that. I really love how they've interpreted both the books and the video game. I think it's spot on.
That works. All right, and so because we like both the fantastical and the scientific, which was your first love, science fiction or fantasy?
Fantasy for sure. I just love getting lost in the magical worlds without worrying about how the tech works.
So, what was your first memory of engaging in the genre?
It was definitely reading. So the memory really sticks with me is picking up my parents' only Terry Pratchett book that they had on their shelves. I don't know why I was drawn to it, but it was Feet of Clay when I was in secondary school, and I absolutely loved it. And then thinking back, well, I guess actually, did you ever read those Choose Your Own Adventure books? I have
All the
really fond
time.
memories of that, and just you
The
jump back
long,
and forth between the choices.
and we totally never cheated. Never.
Oh, no, I didn't, read with all my fingers stuck in the pages so I could flick back. Never.
So what was the choose your own adventure that you did? I love the Lone Wolf, which was sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons fantasy. Only you actually had to like track your weapons and figure out if you won the fight.
Oh, I don't think I did anything as complicated as that. It was normally like choose right and left, and then one of them
Oh, I
ends up
read
in a
those
dead
too.
end. But yeah. So actually, I'm really enjoying with my daughter. We're just starting to get her into some of, well, not the choose your own adventure books, but some of the kind of fantasy type books, like the Worst Witch ones and things like that. So it's really cool seeing her discover a new genre.
There actually is an author in Australia who we've interviewed, R. Max Tilsley, who actually has started writing choose your own adventure books for kids with like zombies and stuff.
Amazing. I'm going to have to get that
Oh,
name off you after the show.
sure. I'll get that link to you after we get on. So, what is it about speculative fiction, the wider sci-fi fantasy genre, that you love?
I love the openness of it, the idea that anything can happen and anything is possible. I find that so exciting. And I also love the escapism of it. Like the real world is hard. So when I read, I really want to escape.
That works. I read to escape as well, so it's nice when people don't throw real world problems at me and we can just pretend that doesn't exist for a few minutes or hours.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. So, how did your love of fantasy translate or transition into you writing stories?
So I've always loved reading speculative fiction or fantasy, and I have always loved writing too. That's a real cliche, but actually, I started writing down stories to publish during the lockdown we had in the UK last year because of the virus or the plague, whatever you want to call it. So I was actually really close to burnout during that time and just needed something to do just for me because we were homeschooling as well. And it was really tough trying to do that and work. So I started writing kids' books. And then after doing that, I thought, you know what? No, I want to write something that's more for me, less for my kids. So that's when I started writing urban fantasy. And now I make sure I take about an hour a day to write for myself and create these stories.
That's a solid plan. So many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So, were there any specific formidable moments that shaped you as a storyteller?
Oh, that's a good question. So my current series, Rise of Dragons, is influenced a little bit by a D&D game I played a few years ago, and the main character in that is very loosely based on a tank character that one of my friends played. So that's one of the influences. And then I guess more personally, being a parent has definitely been a massive journey for me, and I'm thinking about how to bring that into a future series, not this one, but a future one. And I've got a couple of story ideas to play on my experience in the corporate world, and I'm trying to think how to weave that in with some supernatural shenanigans.
That could be interesting. So, normally, if it applies, we ask about military service and how that affected you. You haven't served in the military, but you told me in the pre show a cool story about some fun military tech you got to play with. So, I was hoping you could tell that story.
Yeah, so I got to ride along in a tank, and I looked up what type of tank it was for the show, so you can geek out over it. So it was an FV 432, I believe is how you say that tank. It's about a 17-ton tank, and it had been converted to fire paintballs, so it was a tank experience, and I got to drive along with it, and they're pretty uncomfortable. That's what I will say.
I escorted convoys that were hauling tanks when I was in Iraq, and so we had to do some climbing in them to do the tie downs, and they weren't a lot of fun. Strikers weren't much better. That's the mechanized infantry vehicle that the U.S. uses, but the tankers had it even tighter quarters. So
Yeah, yeah,
they like to
close
say death
ones.
before dismount, but I think that's mostly because they just can't find a way out.
No, I can definitely see how that's the case. And it's really hot in there as well, which I hadn't realized before I was in it. So, yeah, I can imagine it being just so unpleasant to be in for such long periods of time.
And you got a lot of body heat from the people inside of it
Yeah.
and the lack of showers, and it gets pretty rank.
Yeah,
So
we're painting a good picture here.
yeah, so everybody sign up, join the cavalry. So transitioning from the writing side, let's talk about things from a fan angle. So have you ever spotted anybody out in public reading your books?
Not out in public, but I have some wonderful fans who send me shots of themselves on Instagram reading my books, normally accompanied by a large glass of wine or a G&T or something. And I love getting those pictures. They make it feel real. So,
So do they send you sample products of whatever they were imbibing to go with it? Because it's rude not to share.
you know what? I'm going to mention that next time. Next time I get one.
We'll have to see what we can do. All right, if you're listening and you're her fans, you should send samples of the booze you're drinking because manners. All right, so while she has been an interesting guest so far, and we will have her back for a longer episode today, as I mentioned, we're here to talk about her short story in the anthology. And we're doing that because I think there's value in short content that gets overlooked in the rush to write full-length novels in long series, as the markets have shifted and a lot of the short content markets have dried up. I think it's a dang shame. And so I'm going to do my part, and we're going to interview authors about their short stories and short interviews. So let's see what this anthology is all about. It is called, if you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see the cover, Summer Solstice Shenanigans. That's a tongue
Try
twister.
saying that 3 times fast, right?
And I'm not even drunk yet. Because it's not evening yet. Although I guess if you're talking to someone overseas and it's 5 o'clock at their time, does that count? I don't know.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Right. All right. So the this is going to be my attempt at a movie trailer voice. Send your hate mail to Cisca at Blasters and Blades Podcast. A full moon solstice. Let the magic flow. Feel the power. Fae come out to play. Vampires rove from dusk till dawn, and werewolves howl. Do they howl? On this fateful night, out come the witches, demons, vampires, shifters, and fantastic creatures in celebration of magic and mayhem. Some spells can only be cast or curses broken on this rare enchanted night. If you dare, follow the Fae down a magical path, but beware of getting forever lost. There's trouble around every corner amidst the glow of the supernatural. This summer solstice anthology includes 25 brand new, never before published urban fantasy short stories from international best-selling authors, as well as exciting new talent. Wow, I guess that guy's got his job for another day.
No, that was a great introduction. Thank you.
So I'm sure you wrote it yourself. It had nothing to do with the publisher. So what was your story in this anthology titled?
My story is called Summer Solstice in Swindon. And I know you're going to ask me, Swindon is the largest town to where I live. And so it's basically London, still London.
Okay, still London. Everything's London.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we've established this, we will move on. So what can the basic synopsis of your short story? Can you give us the rundown?
Yeah, so the main character is a Lynx shifter who's called Agent Jones, and she works for the Magical Liaison Office, which is an organization trying to keep peace between magical and mundane beings. And instead of going to the largest summer solstice party at Stonehenge, she's called to investigate a failing magical seal underneath a magic roundabout in Swindon, which, as I said, it's a large town in the UK, aka London.
London. So I've heard roundabout sound roundabout when you're Canadian, so it's nice to know that you say it a little bit different. That's the circle thing for all you Americans. We don't have any of those.
It is, but shall I tell you what the magic roundabout is? Because it's a bit crazy.
Go for it.
So it genuinely exists. It's called the magic roundabout. Your listeners can Google it. And it is essentially one large roundabout circle thing surrounded by 5 smaller circle things. And it is absolutely crazy to drive round. You can pretty much go any way you want. And you just navigate all these smaller roundabouts and the big one. And it's crazy to drive.
I've been driving for too many years, and that makes me nervous. So I can't imagine new drivers having to brave that.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I did not have to learn to drive anywhere near one of those things.
And then for Americans to do it on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car, it'd even hairier.
Yeah. Well, it might be easier because if you get them right, you can actually go the wrong way around it if you get the right lanes. But those lanes, to choose the right ones is just, I don't know, you need some sort of magical degree in driving roundabouts.
So you use the magic roundabout as the inspiration for the short story. I like that. Have you ever actually driven it?
I have, but it's. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty dicey going around it. Certainly, I felt that way. So on occasion, I have kind of diverted massively out of my way just to avoid doing it.
Do they have a lot of accidents there? Is this like a dead man's alley kind of thing?
I think they have a few, but I don't think it's as many as you'd expect. I think, yeah, people are. I don't know whether they're used to it or whether everyone's just a great driver apart from me. It's entirely possible.
So does this story fit into a larger universe?
Yeah, it does. So Agent Jones is a secondary character in my Rise of Dragons series. So this short story is a bit of backstory for her about how she ends up in Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales. So actually not London, and that's where the Rise of Dragon universe is set in.
Okay. Have you actually been to Wales to visit the places that you describe, or?
Yeah, I lived there for a few years. I actually went to university there. So it's a city that's really close to my heart. And I really enjoyed going back there for this story.
Okay. And that makes all your reunions tax deductible if it works anything like it does here. That's a smart planning.
Oh my goodness, I never even thought of that.
I have tax accountants in the family. I think about all these things. So given that this story is, and we're not giving financial advice because we don't want you to sue us. Given that this story, short story is the urban fantasy genre, is the rest of the universe?
Yes, so it's all urban fantasy, although, as I said, it kind of follows a different main character. So in the series, the main character is a half-dwarf jeweler called Amethyst, and she just wants to run a shop and have a quiet life, but then her best friend, who's a gnome, gets kidnapped by a cult that wants to raise a dragon. So she gets involved with trying to stop that cult.
So in your urban fantasy universe, do the dwarves and the gnomes and all the magical creatures and the wee beasties, do they hide in plain sight, or are they out in the open?
They're out in the open, so they are, I would say, tolerated by the mundane beings, but it's a bit of an uneasy kind of feel to it. That's why there's this magical liaison office that exists. So anything that happens that's a bit of a magical incident, like seals breaking under magic roundabouts, for example, this office is on the scene trying to contain things and minimize the fact that there's magic and that it's powerful, if that makes sense.
It does. So what is it about urban fantasy, that the genre, that appeals to you?
I really love the mix of magic and the modern world, and the technology we have now is just so amazing. I love exploring how that can help, or in some cases hinder, magic users. So plus, you don't have to create a whole new universe, which is always a bonus when you're writing.
It does make it easier to jump in. So Do you dictate it or you type the old-fashioned way?
I type the old-fashioned way. I have tried dictating, but I don't know what it is. The words just lose a bit of the magic, and then I spot a typo as I'm talking, and the software hasn't picked it up quite right. So then I find myself having to stop and correct it. So for the moment, I'm an old-fashioned typer.
So do you watch some of the urban fantasy shows? I know I just saw an ad for Sweet Tooth over on Netflix, which is sort of the birth of hybrid creatures, which sounds like urban fantasy to me.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I've had a couple of people recommend it to me. I haven't watched it yet. I have really enjoyed Shadow and Bone, which I think is another Netflix one. It's a bit more high fantasy than urban fantasy. And what else have I watched? I did watch Grimm as well. I think that's urban fantasy.
Okay.
So.
And let's see, we have Sweet Tooth. I'm going to add those to the. It said it was Blood and Bones.
Shadow and Bone, I think it was called.
Nice. I'll take that out. I think that was one of the ones Cisca was trying to get us to do a review on. So we might have to have you back to talk about that one. All right.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Do you think when you write urban fantasy and you have fantasy is so intrinsically tied for many people to like early European type cultures, do you feel like living in England and London, because everything's London, do you feel like living there sort of inspires you to tell that sort of story?
Yeah, I think it can do. I mean, the great thing about being over here is there's history absolutely everywhere. So I'm about less than an hour away from Stonehenge, which is, really ancient monument. No one's really 100% sure what it's there for. So yeah, there's just history absolutely everywhere over here, which is really great. I love it.
So just for the record, in case you didn't know, Diana Gabaldine already told us what those were for. It's for time travel.
Oh, time travel. I see. Not aliens then.
Well, I mean, maybe time traveling aliens.
Why not?
All right. So we got some fun stories before we let you go, and we will have you back for a longer episode to talk about the series when we have the full cast of hosts. But which urban fantasy universe from any medium, games, movies, books, would you want to live in, and why?
So my absolute favorite, I think it's urban fantasy universe, is Terry Pratchett's Discworld. I absolutely love it. I love all of the characters, so I think I'd like to go there and meet some of them.
Okay, Terry Pratchett, huh? He's a good one. You can't go wrong there. The Terrys were a good run. Terry Pratchett, Terry Brooks, Terry Goodkind.
Yeah, there's something in the name Terry, wasn't there? It's good.
I think so. So following that, which universe would you not want to live in?
Oh, I mean, there's some that are just really dark and dangerous, and I don't think I'd thrive in that sort of environment. So let me think. Yeah, maybe something more like the Witcher and that kind of gritty, danger around every corner universe. I wouldn't do well.
I mean, you'd have to take up the sword and learn to fence or something.
Yeah, well, actually, I did do a little bit of battle reenactment when I was at university. So I think I've still got my hand and a half sword here. So maybe it wouldn't be as bad as I think.
Now, when you say battle reenactment, are you talking about his living history, like Society of Creative Anachronisms? I don't know if that's across the pond, the SCA. Are you talking about actual reenacting certain periods? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, so I don't think we have the SCA over here, but I guess it's similar. So living history is what I would call it. So those crazy people who get dressed up and go hang around castles, and then they might put on a battle or an archery contest or a joust for the amusement of the paying public. I was in one of those groups in Cardiff, actually. So it was the Cardiff Castle Garrison. I think they've changed their name now. But yeah, it was good fun. I was probably the smallest person to ever put on a helmet and get the chainmail on and go out into a brawl. It's good fun.
I'm sure you won all of them. All the
Maybe,
fights.
but only because everyone thought I was too, small and weak to pick on.
So did you do the archery too? That's something I want to learn.
Yeah. I've got a bow here actually. So yeah, I did archery as well. I really enjoyed it. It's good fun.
It's good way to zen your mind. All right, so last one for the road. So what is your favorite creature to see in an urban fantasy universe?
Well, dragons are always great, and Wales is the land of dragons, so I feel I can lay some claim to that from having lived there and being half Welsh. So
Oh, half
dragons.
Welsh. All right, so you get like a pass if you make up words. They're like, oh, she's Welsh. It's okay. Welsh from London town.
Yeah, I should totally use that.
All right, so as we wrap this up, can you tell listeners where they can find you on the interwebs?
Yes, so I've got a website, www.gemmaclatworthy.com. That's Gemma with a G. So you can join my newsletter there and get a free prequel to the Rise of Dragons series to read, or you can find me on Instagram under Gemma Clatworthy, or Facebook again, Gemma Clatworthy there.
All right, and you can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. You can find us on Twitter at SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. I promise that's actually a real email if you wanted to reach out. We have a Facebook group, which is facebook.com/blasters and blades podcast. You can support the show over at Buy Me a Coffee /author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the show notes that it's for the podcast, and we'll make sure we keep the other co-hosts duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders. Or you can support us on a monthly basis over on anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And that's a show.